I want to pick up, if I can, Scott, on this issue today that came out regarding a nuclear waste dump. A facility was planned near Kimba in South Australia. This has been going on for about a decade. It had been the named site. It's not just for the nuclear waste that may well come from submarines down the track, but also, if you know anyone that's had a cancer treatment, at the moment, all of those wasted nuclear materials are stored on site in hospitals. This was to be a national repository. Well, this deal's collapsed. The federal court ruled a little while back in favour of a local Indigenous group. They didn't want the camp, the dump anywhere near them. And now, unfortunately, the current government refuses to appeal the federal court case, although a lot of experts, haven't they, Scott? They've called for them to appeal the ruling. Now, were you surprised by this decision?
Surprised and disappointed, Peter. As you say, it's been a decade-long process just for the storage of low and intermediate level waste. And South Australia, to its credit, mature governments, it's always been the hope of the side, a very long process, and to just arbitrarily bring it to an end, accepting the decision of a lower court is very disappointing and doesn't bode well for the commitments that we have made under the AUKUS agreements for the storage of high-level waste.
And I guess one of the things about South Australia, it's one of the best places in the world, Caroline, because it's got to be remote and geologically stable as a region to store nuclear waste. And sadly, we don't have another option right now.
Well, Peter, I'm not an expert in where the best locations are, but certainly those factors would appear to recommend South Australia as an ideal spot. But look, they didn't come up with this location on a whim. This was a 7-year process that led to this site being identified and announced as the ideal spot for this nuclear waste to be kept safely. Now, what's going to happen now that they're not challenging it in court? Is it going to be another 7 years before we find another site that might be suitable? Because the government has already said the other sites that had been shortlisted aren't going to be considered. So they're back to the drawing board. But I think there's another important issue that's raised here, Peter, is that all the proponents of the voice who accuse the critics of raising the issue of whether the voice will be consulted on issues like Indigenous policy and saying, oh, well, that's just muddying the waters, or that's misinformation. Of course, they're not going to be consulted on those sorts of issues. Well, I think this case identifies how that could well happen.